Hey there. Quick question. If you had a giant vault of cash like Scrooge McDuck, would you actually swim in it? Because one, it would hurt. And two, if you're rich, you probably wouldn't even have that much cash lying around. Let me introduce you to Melina. Melina owns 5 tech startups, 3 vacation homes, and a dog that eats filet mignon for dinner. You'd think she walks around with a Louis Vuitton bag full of $100 bills, right? Nope. If Melina buys a $20 million yacht, she doesn't whip out a suitcase of money like in the movies. She finances it, or writes it off, or does some wizard level tax maneuver that involves a shell company in Bermuda and ends with her yacht technically being a business expense. Why? Because rich people hate paying in cash. And it's not because they're broke, it's because cash is, well, boring. You can't deduct it, you can't leverage it, and it doesn't work nearly as hard as it could. Let's go back to Melina. Say she just made $5 million from selling some shares in one of her companies. If she cashes out, Uncle Sam immediately pops up like, oh, hey, that's a nice $5 million. I'll just take, oh, let's say a third of that, thanks. Boom! $1.6 million gone in capital gains taxes. But what if Melina doesn't cash out? What if instead she uses those shares as collateral to borrow money? Now she gets, say, $3 million in a loan from a private bank with marble floors and employees who call her Ms. Melina like she's royalty. And here's the kicker. That loan, not taxable, because loans aren't income. They're just borrowed money. So Melina keeps her shares and gets the cash. That's why she doesn't want actual cash just sitting around. It's inefficient. It doesn't grow on its own. Now imagine Bob. Bob's not rich. Bob works a normal job, saves up, and finally has $20,000 in his savings account. Which is great. But that cash, it's just sitting there. And with inflation doing its sneaky little thing in the background, Bob's $20,000 buys less each year. Meanwhile, Melina's assets, stocks, property, maybe even an NFT of a rainbow llama, are appreciating. She's borrowing against them to buy more stuff that appreciates even more. Cash is like leaving your army of dollars just standing around doing nothing. Rich people want their dollars out there, working overtime, flipping real estate, collecting dividends, buying tax shelters in the form of vineyards. And cash? Cash doesn't do that. It just sits. Now let's get into the awkward dinner party scenario. Melina and Bob are seated next to each other. Bob just paid off his car in full. He's proud, and honestly, he should be. But Melina financed her $120,000 luxury SUV and wrote off the interest as a business expense. Why? Because even if she could buy it in cash, she'd rather let her investments earn 8% in the market while she pays 3% interest on the car loan. She's making money by not using cash. It's like financial judo. And don't even get me started on taxes. Paying in cash leaves a trail that the IRS can easily follow. But asset swaps, legal trusts, offshore holdings? Way blurrier. The rich don't avoid cash because they're shady. They avoid it because they've learned that money is a tool, and cash is the least useful version of it. Want a fun example? Let's say Melina wants to buy a mansion for $10 million. She could pay in cash. But if she instead takes out a mortgage with 3% interest and invests her cash somewhere earning 7%, she's making a 4% profit on money she technically still has. Meanwhile, Bob hears mortgage and thinks debt equals bad. But for the rich, debt is like a lever. Used right, it makes everything bigger: investments, returns, even tax benefits. Debt isn't scary if you have assets backing it up. It's a strategy. And that strategy depends on not tying your money up in cash. Even in daily life, Melina doesn't pay for things the way Bob does. She uses business credit cards to rack up points, then writes off the purchase if it's remotely related to work. Lunch with a client? Write off. A flight to Bali for a conference? Write off. Bob, meanwhile, pays for lunch with his debit card and just pays for lunch. Now, here's something most people don't realize. Rich people don't think in terms of what can I afford? They think in terms of what can I leverage? Melina's not hoarding dollars. She's hoarding assets, things that grow, generate income, or help her avoid taxes. Because unlike cash, assets have options. You can borrow against them, trade them, write them off, even pass them on to your kids with fewer taxes. And that's exactly the plan. Keep the wealth in motion, not parked. That's why Melina might technically be worth $50 million, but only have $50,000 in actual cash, and she's totally fine with that. Because her wealth isn't about what's in her checking account. It's about what her money is doing while she's sipping espresso in a tax F. It's about what her money is doing while she's sipping espresso in a tax-efficient corner of Europe. Now imagine if Bob tried to live like Melina. He sells his used Honda, opens a line of credit, buys rental property, and starts talking about leveraging assets at brunch. But without the right assets or knowledge, Bob's just collecting risk like it's Pokemon cards. That's the big difference. Melina's risk is calculated, protected, and tax optimized. Bob's risk is, well, more like vibes. And vibes don't pay off loans. But let's circle back to that original question. Why don't the rich like cash?
Well, because in their world, cash doesn't scale. Think about it like this. If you're trying to build a skyscraper, you don't use Legos. You use cranes, steel, reinforced concrete, the big stuff. Cash is a Lego, nice to have. Good for a snack run. Useless when you're trying to build an empire. Melina wants tools that build, not just sit around being all liquid and boring. And let's talk about that liquidity myth for a second. People say, but isn't cash good because it's liquid? Sure, you can use it fast. But rich people don't want fast. They want powerful. Melina can liquidate assets faster than most people can find their bank app login. She's got lines of credit, brokers on speed dial, assets that move like water when needed. Meanwhile, that liquid $10,000 in Bob's savings account is losing buying power every day thanks to inflation. Liquid? Yes. Productive? Not even close. And then there's the psychological angle. Rich people think of money as energy. Melina sees each dollar as a tiny worker. She doesn't want her workers lounging around in a lazy river of cash. She wants them out flipping houses, earning dividends, hedging inflation, and avoiding taxes like financial ninjas. If those dollars aren't busy, they're useless. Now, this part's kind of wild. Even charities run by rich people don't like to sit on cash. They invest it. Yep. Charitable foundations will take donations and invest them in endowments, stocks, real estate, private equity, then spend the returns. Because even when it's not about profit, it's still about making money move. That's how powerful this mindset is. It's not just about greed. It's about efficiency. Cash is like that one coworker who always shows up but never actually does anything. Looks nice on the surface, but if you're trying to get stuff done, you need producers, not placeholders. Now, let's talk privacy. You might think cash is private, right? Technically, yeah. But rich people aren't stuffing $100 bills under their Tempur-Pedic mattresses. They're using trusts, holding companies, tax-efficient structures so complicated they could double as IKEA furniture instructions. That's how Melina buys art, real estate, even businesses, not in her name. Because anonymity isn't about shady stuff. It's about avoiding lawsuits, taxes, and occasionally jealous cousins. Buying with cash? That's a bright neon sign saying, hey, this belongs to me. Using entities? That's financial invisibility. And yes, we should pause here to acknowledge none of this is illegal. It's just a game, a complicated, expensive, very VIP level game that rich people learn how to play. Melina didn't invent the rules. She just plays them really, really well. Now here's a fun twist. Sometimes rich people borrow money, then invest that borrowed money into something that gives them even more income than the loan costs. That's called arbitrage. And it's basically legal alchemy. Melina borrows at 3%, invests in something earning 8%, and pockets the 5% difference like it's no big deal. Cash wouldn't let her do that. Cash just sits. It doesn't make more of itself. It doesn't multiply unless you use it. And the rich, they don't sit. They invest, borrow, reinvest, insure, hedge, flip, write off, and then do it all over again. It's a loop, a wealth loop, and cash doesn't belong in it unless it's fueling the machine. Let's not forget, the entire financial system is kind of designed for this. Banks want rich people to borrow. That's how banks make money too. They don't get excited when you deposit cash. They get excited when Melina walks in and says, "Hey, I'd like a loan secured by this portfolio of tech stocks and rare Japanese whiskey." So Melina gets the loan. The bank earns interest. Melina earns more money. Everyone wins, except Bob, who's still trying to figure out why his savings account just paid him 73 cents in interest this year. And to be fair, this isn't Bob's fault. Most people were never taught how this works. School teaches you how to write an essay about the Industrial Revolution. It doesn't teach you that rich people avoid cash because it doesn't come with leverage. It doesn't come with tax breaks. It doesn't open secret financial doors. That's not conspiracy talk. That's just capitalism. So, in conclusion, the reason the rich avoid cash isn't because they're allergic to money. It's because they understand how to use money. Cash is static. Assets are dynamic. Cash just sits there. Assets work for you. If you're rich, you want every dollar doing squats, lifting weights, and working overtime in some rental property or stock portfolio. You want options. You want leverage. You want growth. And cash? It's just not built for that. It's not a bad thing. It's just the lowest level on the money ladder. So if you ever see someone bragging about having piles of cash lying around, they're not rich. They're just liquid. If you want me to make other videos explaining these topics, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.